Hey everyone. My mic turned on as I was just having a private little discussion. So thanks everyone for coming and good morning. Hopefully everybody's feeling pretty good after yesterday, after last night's stuff here and the drinks here and then post-drinks after that, I assume. My name's Damian Brady. I work for Microsoft as a cloud developer advocate. And so today's session is going to be about Azure DevOps. I had to rename the title about a week ago because we renamed the product. I will talk a little bit about that. So Azure DevOps itself, by the way, is kind of Microsoft's DevOps application or service, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But if you want to try it out, there's a lot of stuff for free, and most of it's actually for free. So go ahead and try it out. Azure.com/DevOps is kind of our landing page for how we do DevOps and how you can learn to do DevOps. Azure DevOps is the Twitter handle, and they're pretty active as well. So if you have questions or you have comments, tweet at them. They're very good at responding. There's a forum, there's a blog, there's all sorts of stuff as well. And you can always tweet me, DamoVisa, and if you want to email me, also damovisa@microsoft.com will get to me as well. Right, so the first thing I want to say is I'm a member of a Brisbane Slack channel, Brisbane developers Slack channel, and I said that I would call them out explicitly because I've had some very encouraging conversations with people based on the name, especially of Azure DevOps. And in fact, Vanessa, who did a session earlier, pointed out this tweet, which is one of the reactions that we've got as well, which is, you know, I'm glad that Microsoft is finally just selling a DevOps to people so that they don't have to do any of this culture shift stuff. I wanted to get ahead of this, right? That's not what we're doing. The name is, just out of interest, who likes the name Azure DevOps? Actually, let's reverse that. Who doesn't like the name Azure DevOps? Cool. Keep your hand up if you have a better name. TFS? I said better name. So you have a better name? No, okay, all right. So, what was that? Yeah, okay. So look, naming things is hard. And really, Azure DevOps is kind of a nice name for this collection of services that we offer. What I really probably should have called this talk is how to deploy anything to Azure with Azure pipelines, because that's part of the product, and that's really what I'm talking about now. So Azure DevOps is kind of the global product that we have, and then we have a number of services in that product that help you with your DevOps solution. So we are not selling you a DevOps, and please don't go back to your organization saying, Microsoft is selling a DevOps, we need to buy 4 of them, and that'll solve all our problems. Like they didn't accept my name of, you know, super magic, what was the super magic silver bullet? Marketing and politics, obviously, was the reason it wasn't called that. So Azure DevOps is just the name of the product, and the services really help you with that process. So at Microsoft, DevOps still means this combination of people, process, and products, and the focus is on delivering value to your end users. And so we still believe in that. We have a product that we think is really, really good, and I'm going to show you a lot of that. But we can't bring you your people, and we can't bring you your process, all right? So the product can help you, absolutely, but you still need that culture change. You still need people to believe in this, you know, delivery of value on a continuous basis and monitoring what people are doing and shifting your priorities based on what you can see, small increments and all of that kind of stuff. Because this stuff is really important, right? I'm not just saying do DevOps because that's what's in my job title, right? There's an awesome report that comes out every year called the State of DevOps Report, run by an organization called DORA, DevOps Research and Assessment. And that's run by Nicole Forsgren, Dr. Nicole Forsgren primarily, and also Gene Kim and Jez Humble, who are kind of big names in the DevOps community. And it's based on, you know, well over 30,000 data points of actual real teams and how they operate. And there's 4 key metrics that we talk about in DevOps. There's deployment frequency, change failure rates, lead time for changes, and mean time to recover. So these are kind of their 4 metrics that they want you to focus on. And these are the numbers from this report, right? This is real data and real academic research. And they've shown that teams that do this stuff well, that do DevOps well, are many, many, many times better at all of these 4 measures. So in other words, they can deploy faster. They can deploy not just, you know, quickly, but the time between having a change and having it in production is much, much less. When they put stuff in production, it is much less likely to fail. And then if something does fail, they're much, much quicker at repairing it. And all of these metrics go in parallel, right? So if you're good at one of them, you're very likely to be good at the others as well. So this stuff is important. Just in case you're in a DevOps session thinking, well, I don't really believe in DevOps as well. The other really interesting thing that came out of the 2018 version of this report is they did some analysis of the different industries that these teams were in, and they found that it absolutely does not matter what industry you're in. This stuff is still consistent. So if you're thinking as well that, look, we can't do this deployment frequency stuff because we need to check everything really, really carefully because we are in healthcare or we are in finance or something like that. The data does not show that's the case, right? It doesn't matter what industry you're in, this stuff can be done and this stuff improves not just your team's delivery of software, but it also improves your organizational success. So they measured it based on the organizational goals because different industries have completely different goals. So how often did these companies meet their own goals? And if they're doing DevOps properly, the organization as a whole is meeting their goals more often. Right? Clearly, I could talk about this for an entire hour, but we have other things to look at. More than happy to have a conversation with anybody about this report or the stuff that's in it. I couldn't talk your ear off. So Azure DevOps itself is just a product that can help with some of this stuff. And it consists of these 5 services. Azure Boards, which is kind of planning all your work. It's the work item tracking stuff that we used to have in Visual Studio Team Services, which is the old name for this. So your Scrum boards and your Kanban boards and your planning and things like that. Azure Pipelines, which we'll focus on, is your continuous integration, continuous delivery. Azure Repos is Git and Team Foundation version control repositories where you can keep your code. Test Plans is planning the way that you test your application. And then Azure Artifacts as well, which is where you can put your artifacts as well. You don't have to put them there, but you can put them there. They just released a feature as well, which is universal packages in Azure Artifacts. So you don't have to put it into a zip or put it into a NuGet package or something like that. You can just give it a bunch of files and say, this is an artifact, put it up there and version it like this, which is kind of cool. That just came out a couple of days ago. But yes, we're going to focus on Azure Pipelines because I'm going to be deploying a bunch of stuff to Azure. Any questions about Azure DevOps or DevOps in general? Because I'm going to move through and we'll hit demos very soon. No questions? I've explained it perfectly. Excellent. So Azure Pipelines is the continuous integration, continuous delivery part of Azure DevOps. The really important thing as well, despite the fact that it has Azure in the name, we don't need you to deploy to Azure. You can use Azure Pipelines to deploy to AWS, to your own infrastructure. At DDD Sydney a few weeks ago, I used it to deploy to a Raspberry Pi that was sitting on stage with me. You can deploy to anywhere. It's not focused on Azure specifically. So any language, any platform, any cloud, it's extremely extensible. So there's hundreds of extensions that add new tasks for your build or your release pipeline. We have native support for a lot of containerization stuff, and we'll see some of that too. Kubernetes, whether you're managing that yourself or it's managed service with Azure or with AWS or somebody else. And then the big announcement that came out when we released Azure DevOps was this support for open source. So you basically, if you have an open source project or any public project on GitHub or Bitbucket or somewhere like that, you get free builds and releases for good. It's just free, right? So you can use this stuff without paying anything if it's a public project. I'll drill into that a little bit more. Microsoft, as you probably know, has a bit of a mixed history with open source. We've come from days of a former CEO saying Linux is a cancer, and we're not trying to rewrite any of that history. What our current CEO is saying is, look, try to judge us based on what we're doing now and what we're doing in the future. And as an example of that, this is another completely tangential thing which came out the other day. We're actually contributing into Hacktoberfest, which is this basically this global non-Microsoft thing about submitting pull requests to open source repositories. So Microsoft's joining it, and we have 8,500 a few more than 8,500 open source repos on GitHub. And if you submit a pull request to them in October, we'll send you a t-shirt, which is kind of cool. And I don't want to think of the logistics of that either. Especially one of the guys who's managing this, who did this tweet. You should have heard him talk about how GDPR means that people can't actually give us their addresses so we can send them t-shirts. Don't know how they got around that, but we're doing this as well. Oh, that link, by the way, really hard to see, so there's another one. demo.ms/ms-hacktoberfest. If you want to take part, there's the blog post showing how to do it. Basically, submit a PR to any of the open source libraries. By the way, that includes docs.microsoft.com. So, hot tip, if you see a typo, you can spend 4 seconds and get a free t-shirt, which is why I don't want to think about the logistics. So we're actually getting behind this open source stuff. So the Azure Pipelines offer for open source is unlimited build minutes, and this is whether you're using your own infrastructure, so your own agents on your own infrastructure, or whether you're using the hosted agents. So we host build agents for Windows, Linux, and Mac. So you can actually build iOS apps on hosted agents without installing any of your own stuff or needing a MacBook. And up to 10 free parallel jobs. So you can run 10 builds at a time, or 5 builds and 5 releases. We can do all that sort of stuff as well. So I kind of thought we should start at this integration with GitHub, because we're talking about open source, and we're talking about building this stuff with Azure Pipelines for open source stuff. So one of the other announcements that came out at the same time was integration with GitHub. We have a marketplace, a GitHub Marketplace app. Are they called apps? I don't know. Everything's called apps. A GitHub Marketplace offering which makes this pipeline really, really nice to use Azure Pipelines and actually use this offer for open source stuff. So let's have a look. Oh yeah, I was testing the Wi-Fi. It's pretty good. Way better than home. So here is my GitHub repo. Is that big enough for everybody? Yep, great. So this is basically just a .NET Hello World. It's a .NET new Razor application. And let's just pull this open. .NET. Cool, that's the one. So I'm going to open that in VS Code just so you can see it. Cool. So yeah, just a straight ASP.NET Core application. The code is in GitHub, and it's a public project, which means that I can make use of this pipeline stuff. Right? So to get started, you can go to Marketplace, and then scroll down a bit. We're not right at the top, which is fine. Continuous integration, and there is an extension here, Azure Pipelines, which moves every time I go to this page, but it's up here now. So look for Azure Pipelines and the rocket. Click on that. I've already granted access to this, I think. All right, so I can configure that, or I can set up a free trial. What I'm going to do, I'm actually going to choose this free one. By the way, you can add parallel jobs if you want to. If that's not good enough for you, you can do that directly through GitHub. This is going to tell me I already have it. Nope. Cool. I successfully removed it. And it tells you what you get. So Linux, Mac OS, and Windows, 10 free parallel jobs, and so on. By the way, if you have a private repository, so if you don't have an open source project, you still get 1,800 minutes of hosted builds per month and 1 parallel build agent, right? So we're not leaving private projects behind. We're just making it much better for public projects. That used to be 240 minutes as well, so they've massively increased that. All right, so let's do that, and it's going to say that I do have it installed. Let's just... And I don't have it installed. Cool. That's good. All right, there we go. So I can either choose to give it access to all my repos, which I don't want. I'm only going to give it access to this .NET DevOps one. And it will have access to do a bunch of stuff. So let's just put that in. It's reminding me to log in. So I'm logging into GitHub first and logging into my Microsoft account for Visual Studio Team Services to connect them all up. Sorry, not Visual Studio Team Services. That's one, all right? I have a bunch of these Azure DevOps projects. So I'm going to use my MS demos Let me zoom in so you can see. But if I didn't have an existing Azure DevOps organization, I can create a brand new one. And this is free as well. I'm not paying for any of this. And I can either select a project or create a new one. I'm going to create a new one. I'm going to call it .NET DevOps. And I'm going to say continue. So that's going to go and set up the connection between GitHub and my Azure DevOps instance. And it's going to give me the ability to set up a pipeline, so get started with this stuff. So it's creating the project at the moment, and in a second, it'll bump me into the pipelines feature as well. One thing that you'll notice as well when this completes is that Visual Studio Team Services used to have all of those features installed. So you automatically had your work items, and you had your repositories, whether you used them or not, and you had your builds and your releases and stuff like that. We've changed that a lot with this. So the only option I have now is pipelines. That's the only thing that's currently turned on. I can turn on the other ones, that's fine, but if I'm only using pipelines, then I don't really need to see work items, or I don't really need to see the test plans and things like that. So that's the only thing that's turned on at the moment. It puts me into this new pipeline, so let's just create a new one. This is where my code is. It's already connected to GitHub. So my repo is .NET DevOps. It's not always great at selecting the right template to use. It's just saying, I don't quite know what you've got there. Here's a starter pipeline. That's the recommended one. I'm doing an ASP.NET Core one, so I'm going to choose that as my template. And it's going to create a YAML file. So the difference between this experience and the previous one, or the old one in Visual Studio Team Services, is it was much more visual. That was the vision that you got, was basically your list of tasks, and you can set all of the all of the properties and so on in the UI. You can still do that, and we'll do that a little bit later. But we've moved a lot more towards these YAML build definitions, and the reason is that means your configuration, your way of building your application, sits alongside your code. So before, if you made a change to your application and you had to change your build, then you had to choose which one of them to break first, right? You either change your code and the build breaks, or you change your build and it doesn't compile the current code. So if you're doing stuff in a branch, for example, it's really difficult to align those two things, right? So having your build definition right alongside your code means that you can make a change to your code in a branch and make a change to the build definition that matches what you've done to your code. It means it's versioned. It means that you can see exactly what's happened with your build definition. It means you can go back in time and say, I want to build the code at this particular point in time, and it also has the build definition at that particular point in time. So this is really powerful. So this is the template that it's given me. YAML and the stuff that you put in there is not as straightforward as dragging and dropping kind of tasks. So there's some pretty good docs around how to do it. So let's actually go and use those docs to do what I want to do. At the moment, there's one step, which is a .NET build, right? So I want to add a little bit to that. I want to do a .NET restore first. I want to do a .NET build. I want to publish it and put it in a zip, and I want to push it back up to Visual Studio. Sorry, damn it, there's two. To Azure DevOps so I can use it to release to Azure later. So let's do this the way that I would expect other people to do it. Click on that link to go to the docs. And let's just run through and say, this is how we would expect you to do a .NET Core application. So our build environment, we've got our pool, that's already set. If we need to use a particular .NET Core version, we can specify that as well with this task. We can restore the dependencies just by doing a .NET restore. So I'm going to take that one. Let's do that. And let's do a .NET restore first. Great. Let's go to what's next. We're building. That's great. .NET build. Running tests. I don't have any tests. Demo code doesn't have tests. Demo code doesn't have tests. Nice. All right, so publish build artifacts. So I want to publish the artifacts that I've built as well. There was another one as well. Sorry, .NET publish. Oh, that's further down. So you can basically go through these steps, deploy the web app from the build pipeline if you want. I wouldn't recommend doing that. You can build a container. There's explanations of how to do all that sort of stuff. So you can go through and work all this stuff out. The actual deployments here, you can see all of the different things you can do. And then if you go to reference, here are the tasks. And there's all of these build tasks that will show you exactly how to do that work. So the actual build tasks, there's also utility ones, test ones, and they will show you the YAML that you need to put in there to actually construct your build definition. I'm going to take a shortcut because I'm lazy, and I'm going to do that. So that's just a bunch of YAML that I've got pre-prepared. So we're doing a .NET restore, we're doing a .NET build, we are doing a .NET publish, but rather than just using a script step, we're using one of the built-in tasks, which is the .NET Core CLI. So .NET publish web projects, here's some arguments, and then zip it after the publish. So you can use tasks that we have, or you can use just script files as well, or scripts as well. And then I'm going to publish my artifacts. I'm going to publish my build up so I can use it later. So that's my build definition, and I'm going to save that and run it. Now, I could commit this directly to master, and actually I think I will, because demo code. And so that's actually just going to create an Azure pipelines.yaml in my repository. So if we jump back to GitHub, .NET DevOps, we should be able to see there is now an Azure Pipelines YAML there alongside my code. So that's all it's done. It's just added that YAML file. But as a result, Azure DevOps, that was nearly 3. Azure DevOps has now picked up the fact that I have a build definition in there, and it's just doing a continuous integration build because I have that definition. So it's grabbed the agent, it's getting the sources, it's going to do a .NET restore, .NET build, release, .NET publish, and so on. Cool. While that's running, any questions about what I've done so far? I'm going to do more stuff. Awesome. Everybody looks like good. Yes, question? Yeah, so the question was, how do you support things like publishing to Octopus? Because that used to be with VSTS. You absolutely can. So the task that I had there for .NET Publish, I think, which was a build task, it had a name which was .NET CLI, something or other like that. That name can also be used for any of the extensions. So any of the extensions that you installed that added new tasks, they also have an ID. They basically just have a name that you can use. So I'll show you in a minute how to get one of those. Actually, why don't I just show you now? Nothing like going off script. So if we did, for example, here's an ASP.NET full. I think I have a pipeline set up. Even if I don't, let's just do one. Yep, there we go. Let's edit that pipeline. So this one I don't think is using the YAML definition. This is using the UI. So you can still do this. You can still use the UI. So if I wanted to grab, let's actually add the Octopus one. Create an Octopus release, for example, just to choose that one. I can, once I set this up, oh, this is going to be awkward. Let's do a new one. I'm pretty sure I wrote this so I can just like, I think I know you can just, and then the API key is that. I remembered it. Project name, you can just type that. All right, we're good. So let's not queue that, but let's save that. And then up the top of this task, you can view the YAML for that task. And so you can use that same YAML in a YAML build definition. And that's from an extension that I got from the marketplace as well. So we're not restricting the tasks that you have done before. If you are using Octopus, fantastic, you can keep using Octopus. The name of this task is a little bit longer than the others. Octopus deploy.octopus, yeah. So that's the full name of the task. It has to be fully qualified if it's not one of ours. But it's exactly the same. There's a YAML definition for any of those extended tasks as well. That was a good question. Thanks. I especially liked it because I could answer it. All right, so this build has now completed, and all of this completed. I can have a look at the artifacts as well, and I have a drop folder, and I can use that inside Azure DevOps later on. And it's just got the zip, which is my application. So that's cool. I have that artifact in there, but I haven't deployed it anywhere yet. I've just got this build, and the build has succeeded. One other thing which is quite cool is if you use GitHub and you use pull request methods and things like that, this will actually integrate really nicely with the checks. So if I made a change to this and made it hello Sydney, we'll save. Oh, not bugs. There we go. Let's commit that and push. Oh. All right, sure. I guess other people have done changes. That was actually me adding the YAML, so let's try that again. Just incidentally as well, when we do this, I just did that against master, so that was dumb. All right, let's do it this way. Git. Can anybody help me with the git command so I don't have to hit Stack Overflow? I want to do a new branch, B, and then it'll just do a new one if I do it. What am I doing? Title. What's that? I'm doing DevOps, yep. I'm doing a DevOps. Let's make another change. Hello, Sydney, properly this time. Make that change. Now we are hopefully in that. And let's push. No upstream, yeah, publish it to, oh, I need to do that, don't I? Oops. This is how I work, by the way. I just do git push, let it complain, and then I just copy that. Does everybody else do the same thing? I feel like that's not uncommon. All right, so pushing that up to a branch. Back in GitHub, I should be able to see that once that's pushed, there's a new pull request. So what's cool is that I have this new pull request. When I create it, it'll go through the normal standard checks. And you can see here that there is a check for that build definition that I've defined. So if we go back to Azure DevOps, and so that'll actually kick off and start doing a build. If we go back to Azure DevOps, which is here, we should be able to see in our builds, it's doing this new one, which is a pull request build, right? So if that build fails, it's not going to let me merge that back into master, which is really, really handy for open source projects, right? If we actually have a look at that build definition again, we can see that the triggers, there's 2 of them set up. So you can change this if you don't want it to work like this, but there's the continuous integration, and then there's a pull request validation trigger as well. So just out of the box, without me doing anything, it does this pull request validation. And then in GitHub, once it's completed that build, it'll say, yes, it's okay, you can merge now. Cool, that makes sense? I did that the hard way, but by forgetting to do branches and things. But that's how it works just out of the box. I haven't really done a lot of work here. So we have this build, but we need to deploy it, right? We need to push it to Azure. So let's actually just go up to Azure first, and we'll create a new website to deploy it to as the kind of first thing we want to do. So web app, let's create a new one called .NET DevOps. Let's do it on Linux because it's ASP.NET Core. I'm going to create a new hosting plan. By the way, if you need to know what a hosting plan is, it's basically just how much am I going to pay for this thing. Marketing probably wouldn't like me saying that, but anyway. So this is going to cost me about $93 a month if I wanted to. And I'm just using a paid one so it's a little bit faster. So this one demo. So I'm using that. And I can also choose the runtime stack that I'm using in Azure, by the way. There's a lot of Node. There's a few PHPs. There's a version of Python, Ruby, Java. But I'm using .NET Core 2.1. Sorry, that wasn't meant to be a question. There is Java as well. So let's create that. So that's going to create an empty web app for me, which is Linux. And it's expecting that I'm going to run .NET Core on the thing. So I have this place to deploy it to. There's a few different ways I could deploy it. I could right-click publish, but everybody knows you don't do that, right? you want to set up a pipeline. And we have a pipeline here for building, but then I want to use the release feature inside Azure DevOps rather than Azure pipelines as well, rather than just doing it in the build. I don't want to deploy in my build definition. So let's go to the releases section. I actually, just to let you know, I have two because I have a preview one turned on as well. So let's go to the preview one because it's much prettier. And there's no release pipeline found. So because I'm zoomed in, oh, there's a bug. I can create a new pipeline like that, or I can go to my build, and let's choose the CI build, and straight from there, I can say I want to release this. So that'll set some of this up for me. It'll set up the continuous deployment trigger, and it'll say this is the artifacts that you're going to get. So all of that stuff's done for me. And then it gives me the option of a bunch of different templates for releasing as well. So Azure App Service deployment is what I'm doing. We're going to call this deploy to production because that's what you do. And then there's a few settings that I need to set up to deploy to Azure. I need to give it an Azure subscription. Has that been created already? It has. Let's pin it. Great. So we've got this .NET DevOps one. My Azure subscription, I've got a few of them here. I have this one, which is this is me being cloud privileged, which means I don't need to pay for any of it. That's on Uncle Satya. So I can either authorize that and it'll give me access to everything in that subscription, but I probably don't want to do that. I want to click the drop-down advanced options and restrict it to just the resource group that I'm using. I don't want it to have access to everything. If somebody changes that release definition so it'll deploy to somewhere else or delete resource groups or something like that, I definitely don't want that. So I put that in a new one, didn't I? .NET DevOps. That's the one I just created. So let's zoom out and say OK. So this is going to set up a service principal between Azure and Azure DevOps, which only has access to that resource group. If you want more control, there is a full version of that service connection dialog, or you can go into Azure and set all this stuff up really specifically, which is probably what you should do. But again, demo code. So I'm just going to start using that now. Thank you for that. That was Damian McLennan who said that as well, by the way. So he also has demo code, I believe. You have test. All right. So that's one thing. We've got our subscription there. It's a web app. And then the app service name, it might not find this because it's brand new. No, so let's just call it .NET DevOps. So that's the app service that I'm deploying to. And so those are the only settings I need to set. That'll go away in a sec. It's by default selected that I'm going to build this on a Visual Studio, on a Windows machine with Visual Studio 2017. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use the hosted Linux. Actually, I'm going to use hosted Ubuntu 16.04. So these are the hosted builds. These are the ones that you have all of your free minutes on without installing any of your infrastructure. But you can also set up your own infrastructure as well if you wanted to use something else. I'm going to just choose Ubuntu. So it's going to do this work on an Ubuntu agent that we host for you. Now, they're still complaining about this, so let's just choose these again. It might save. No, it's not going to save. Some of this is new, by the way. So we get some interesting behavior. Oops. Oh, that's good. All right. Reload. This didn't happen when I ran through the demo before stage as well. Let's do this again. Let's create a new release from here. I'm going to do this much quicker. Release. It's Azure App Service Deployment. Prod. Task. We'd already set up that subscription. That's great. It's a web app, .NET DevOps. Thank you. All right. The JavaScript worked at that time. And then we're going to choose our Ubuntu 16.04. All right. It's much faster when I'm not talking, isn't it? So let's save that. And now we have a pipeline which has a build definition defined in YAML, and it also has a release definition in Azure DevOps as well. So the combination of this means that when there's a new build, a new change to my code in master, it'll build it, and then it'll deploy it out to Azure. So we can just set up a release here, but why don't we just merge that pull request? Because you can see that conflict has, or the checks have all passed, that build has succeeded. We can even drill into the details. And if we do that, we go onto the checks pages, and we can drill into that, into Azure pipelines and that build and so on. So we can see all of the stuff the same way you would in any other GitHub project. Let's do it again. All right, so let's merge that pull request. And we should see as well, because we're now back into master, we'll do another build and a release here. So in builds, there's a CI build up and running for GitHub. So that'll complete, we'll get our artifact, and then we'll push that artifact to Azure. So that'll take a minute or two, and I ran through a few different things. Any questions about what I've shown you, this kind of flow from GitHub for the open source libraries? Yeah? So the question was, is there a way to tag that it's a PR build rather than a master build? That is a fantastic question, and I don't know the answer off the top of my head. So I don't know the answer. I will come back to that one. Yeah, hit me up later. There's somebody else will be like, yeah, just do this. But I don't know what this is. Yep. You can, I mean, I was looking as well, you can do branch filters as well. I think you might need to put a task in there to have a look at that filter and then tag it, or have a look at where it came from and then tag it appropriately. But that means that that task exists in the build definition for everything. It's just it's going to be dependent on where it comes from. So yeah, there would be a way to do that, but I just don't know off the top of my head. Any other questions? Ones that I can answer would be great. Nope, okay. So while that's going ahead, I want to do one more thing. I'm just deploying to this web app that I created by clicking on stuff in the Azure portal, right? Which is not great DevOps practice, okay? It should be part of my definition of my application, like building that infrastructure. Right? I shouldn't have to call the operations team and say, can you just provision a new web app because I need a place to deploy it to, right? That's not a great way of operating. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add that definition of the infrastructure I need to deploy to my release definition to say, this is the infrastructure you need to release to, and we're going to deploy that. And we're getting a little bit more into the deploying anything to Azure as we do this as well. Just to show you that this is working, that build is completed, so we are now kicking off a deployment to production. And if you haven't seen this UI, if you've been using Visual Studio Team Services, the UI is pretty nice. So we can look at the logs as well, but we can also see this in-progress stuff, which is very pretty. Yeah, so you can see how it's going. You can also, if it fails, you can redeploy from here and things like that. Much nicer than it was. All right, so we've got our .NET DevOps web app, but I created this manually by going through and clicking on stuff, right? Which is not great. We don't want to do that. So let's go to this .NET DevOps web app. Let's go to the resource group that we created, and let's generate a template to define this resource group. So all of the different things that I'm going to deploy alongside it. If we go to that resource group, and by the way, in Azure, a resource group is pretty much just a collection of stuff that's grouped together and built together, and you can do stuff together, right? It's a good way of grouping all of the different things that run with an application. You can see there's two things here. There's that service plan that I created, and then there's the .NET DevOps web application that's there. So I want to create what's called an ARM template, which is an Azure Resource Management template, which defines this, and I want to include that in my release definition to say, if this doesn't exist, create it. If it does exist and it's different to what I've told you need to create, update it. There's a few different things you can do there. This is the way that I generally get these ARM templates out because it's a little bit of weird JSON. It's hard to just handwrite. I go into the resource group itself and I go to deployments because it lists all of the things that you deployed as a resource group, whether you did it through code or not. I can see one website that I created, and if I go to template, I can see the JSON that was created, and I can just copy and paste that, right? There's one more thing that I need to do to get this running first, and so I'm just going to duck back to here. It's an ASP.NET web application, but out of the box, the web app doesn't know what to run. So in application settings, I'm just going to quickly add a setting here, which is the startup file. So it's basically saying run .NET and .NET DevOps DLL. So it knows how to run the thing. That's not going to be my template because it wasn't in that deployment. But if we go back to that template, it's just another setting that you can add in there, so part of that JSON. All right, so let's do this. Let's grab the deployment. Let's go back again. Let's see that template. So there's a template there, and then there's a bunch of parameters as well. So usually you'll grab both of these, and you'll put them in with your code. I've done that ahead of time, thankfully. I don't know why I cleared that. That's weird. And let's just do a pull. So in my repo, I've actually got an ARM template. So this has got the template itself. The only thing I've changed is I've added a startup parameter, and then that belongs here as app command line. So I'm just using that parameter, so I can change it later on if I wanted to run something else. And then in my parameters file, I'm just setting that to .NET DevOps DLL. So the definition says, here's my web app, and here's how you actually run that. So anything in Azure that you can change with that UI, you can also change in this template. All right, so I have that template. I need to do one more thing to my build definition as well. Let's go to my YAML. There's my Azure Pipelines YAML. I need to add one more task here. So I'm publishing my web application, but that doesn't include my template that I've added. So I also put that in a thing. Oops. Oh, good. Let's just do that. Cool. So this is the same one, build the publish artifacts, but I'm saying get it from the ARM template folder and put it in as another artifact called ARM template. So this means that I've got two artifacts from my build now. I've got my built application, and I have my ARM templates. And those will both be available to my release definition. So let's change this. Added YAML. Grab that. Commit it directly to master. Push. And then over here in my release definition, once that builds, it's going to build. It's going to create those two artifacts. So we can see there's that CI build for GitHub is completed. That was the one that I did before. If we wait here for a second, it should hopefully kick off a new one. There we go. It's my new build. So that new one with my YAML template is in there. So when that completes, I will have two artifacts that I can use in my release. Let's just have a look at what this one did while we're waiting for that build to complete. It's gone to prod. And if we go to our .NET DevOps and go to that URL, we should hopefully see that up and running. So this is deployed to this known web app. So the change that I've made now, we're just waiting for that build to complete, and then it will kick off another release, which I'll probably cancel. Actually, let's just edit the pipeline and make that not do continuous deployment. And I need to change the task for that build definition as well. So it can use or the task for the build definition, sorry, the release definition. Let me start that sentence again. We're going to change the tasks for that release definition to grab the ARM template and define and actually deploy that. and then deploy the application on top of that, the web application on top of that. So we need another task here. Actually, let's do this as another phase. So the agent job is going to be deploy infra. This one is going to be deploy app. They're in the wrong order, so let's just move that. And then we need to add a resource group template. And so this is going to ask for an Azure subscription. We're using the same resource group, so that subscription is still fine. That service plan is still fine. The resource group we're using is .NET DevOps. It's deploying to Australia Southeast, I think I said. And then our template needs to be this linked artifact. So at the moment, we only have that one artifact, I believe. We only have that drop folder. So when that other build completes with the change to add the ARM template, and the build that should define that ARM template will have another option available to us. So I can't do that now. That build is completed. Let's look at the artifacts, and we can see there's two of them now. There's the build, and then there's the ARM template. So if I go back and make that change again to the release definition, I apologize for skipping around a little bit here. It's difficult to do a couple of things in parallel. So let's do that again. Let's add a new agent, call that infra. But now, because there's a build that's actually being created, it knows about this other artifact that I've got. Same thing. Resource group is .NET DevOps. Location is Australia East, or Southeast, I think. And then our templates, we should be able to see there's another one here now. There's an ARM template. So I'm saying this is the template that I want you to use to define my resource group. And then here's the template parameters. So again, the parameters file that I added. Oops, parameters. And then in this definition, I can override stuff as well. So I can say, well, I don't want it to be called .NET DevOps because I've already got that. I want to deploy to a different location. This can be set with variables too. So you can say, I want a different template, a different web application for my different environments. So rather than it being demo.NET DevOps, I could use a variable in there. But at the moment, I'm just going to do -2. It actually writes out all of those, so I can kill the rest of them. And then save that. The other change I need to make, though, is to tell this to actually deploy the web application to .NET DevOps 2. So when I save that and create a release, that'll create the infrastructure for me, and then it'll deploy the web application to that infrastructure. So as well as the application itself, we're doing infrastructure as code, and we're defining where it needs to be deployed to. Now, that ARM template that I've got is just for that website. But you can do this for anything. So if I added a Cosmos DB, or nearly everything, if I added a new Cosmos DB and just chose some names, by the way, I just mashed when I was practicing this, I mashed the keyboard here, and it said, no, somebody's already used that one. This is amazing. So I can also get automation options for this. I can get my template and my parameters for my Cosmos DB, or my SQL database, or my network, like virtual network. I can do all of this stuff and define that as part of my definition. So you can really deploy anything that you can deploy to Azure can be done and defined with these ARM templates. And then, of course, because we're just using script steps, or we can just use script steps, we can really do anything we want on these agents. So again, we can deploy anything we want to any of these clouds. If we go back to our .NET DevOps resource group, cool. We should see, if we refresh this after it's done some work, that there'll be another web application that we've got. Oh, what did I do wrong? These lists. This is a good example of it giving you complete access to these logs. Deployment failed. Starting deployment, there were errors in that. Cool. Cannot find server farm with S1 demo. Did I call it something else? Oh, no, I didn't, but I also deleted it. So you get the idea. You can deploy the infrastructure with it, and you can deploy the application on top. Cool. I need to move on. Any questions about what I've shown you? Nope. Good? Cool. One thing I will mention as well is you can create this entire pipeline, sample code, and all sorts of stuff from another part of Azure called Azure DevOps Projects, and it will give you sample source code and give you a number of options of where to deploy it. It'll build Docker containers. It'll do all sorts of stuff. I had an example here, which was Go, for example, that's running in a Docker container that gets created as part of your build, uploaded to Azure Container Registry, and then deployed into a Kubernetes cluster, for example. You can set this up and see how that looks in Azure pipelines, which is really, really handy for learning how this stuff fits together. And if you don't want to use those those areas to start, you can start inside Visual Studio. You can start inside the Azure portal. You can start inside Azure DevOps itself, or you can start inside GitHub, which we just walked through as well. So there's a number of entry points for this Azure pipeline stuff as well. So just to summarize as well, Azure DevOps itself is this collection of services that are available to you. Azure Pipelines is kind of the draw card as far as I can see it. It's the pipeline for any of your projects deploying to any location. It's easy to set up, and it's completely free for open source projects as well. So I would encourage you to give that a go. Go and have a look. The pricing is pretty good. Even if it's a private repository and you're doing your own private work, $6 a month is not bad. And then the rest of it is completely free to a certain extent for private stuff and completely free for public. I will be around for questions afterwards, but apart from that, thank you very much.